obviously, if you do put yourself in positions that require more flexibility, you'll get more flexible. That's just a given because of the laws of adaptation. But I think what yoga does and why it would be so great for men is it gives you a huge sense of body awareness, self-perception, even just like, proprioceptive type stuff. So if you are an athlete or you are a weekend warrior and you like to go skiing or whatever, I think that like the familiarity with yourself, emotionally, mentally, and physically, there's nothing like yoga for that. And that's not really something that has been researched or can be researched, because like we talk about this all the time. Like they do this, they will pit regular exercise versus proprioceptive exercises. Well, what is a proprioceptive exercise? How is it different than any other exercise? It's like, it's the point of paying attention. You know what I'm saying? So I think that is the biggest takeaway. And as a result, all that time looking inward and paying attention should hopefully bleed into relationships with others, right? Now we're back to these 8 limbs, and back to the sense of community and how you interact, not just with yourself, but with the people in your life and how your friendships form and all of that. That to me would be the main reason.
Hello and welcome to Guys Talking Yoga, a podcast created to help inspire more men to get into the practice of yoga by sharing the stories and conversations of other guys and experts in the yoga field. This week, we have a fantastic guest. Speaking of experts, we've got Las Vegas-based yoga teacher and educator and massage therapist, Miss Jules Mitchell, joining us. Also author of the 2019 book, Yoga Biomechanics, Stretching Redefined. This was a great conversation, guys. Listen, you want to talk about someone who knows their stuff. Jules certainly knows her stuff, and she's got a unique approach where she blends the tradition of yoga with her really super extensive study in biomechanics in order to help teachers develop their craft and empower them with education. And in this conversation, Jules shares her journey from her discovery of yoga in college to becoming a leading voice in the field, and emphasizing the importance of understanding tissue behavior, stretching, and the broader implications of a yoga practice. And we delve into the challenges, of course, for guys trying to get more men into yoga, discussing, societal norms and the need for male role models, which we do need much better and more male role models. And of course, the transformative power of yoga in fostering self-awareness and community. Now, listen, we know you guys have a lot of choices when it comes to listening to some yoga podcasts. So we always are grateful and humble that you choose to follow this show and to go on this journey with us. So thank you so much for that. Don't forget, you can keep track of us and keep track of what's happening with Guys Talking Yoga through all of our social media channels, heading over to the website. And if you've got any suggestions for a guest that you'd like to hear, do not be afraid to reach out to us and let us know. All right. So with all that out of the way, let's get to Miss Jules Mitchell.
Yeah, I took my first yoga class in college, and I knew what it was. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just kind of,
it just felt good.
Yeah. I had a familiarity. I don't know if I went with my mom to classes when I was a kid. I don't know, but like I just knew it, it knew me and I knew it. So that was the beginning of it. And, I stuck with it. I wasn't like super dedicated. I was in my 20s, but I continued for years, and, I'd go a lot, and then I'd take a little break, and then I'd go again. And then my mom passed away in 2003. And that's when I started going like all the time. I kind of latched onto it for my emotional well-being. And that was it. Then I became a teacher, and, the rest is history.
Why did you make the jump to be a teacher?
I think I was at like a kind of a period where I was just really lost. I'm the oldest child. There's 2 of us. And my mom had just passed away, and my dad was disabled and not well. And my parents were immigrants. So I was like the person holding everything together, and my parents were divorced, and so it was like my sister was younger, so she went to grad school. I didn't get to go to grad school because I had to do all of this. And so I was just bartending because I lived in Las Vegas, and nightclub bartending makes a lot of money in 2 days. So you can handle all your stuff, and so it was like, now one parent was gone. I only had one other parent to deal with, and I was like, well, I guess why don't I start teaching yoga? It was like, like another waitress job. I didn't really take it that seriously as like a career or a profession. I was like, I like this. It makes me feel good. Let me take a yoga teacher training, and I started with 2 classes a week or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until my father passed that I was like, okay, now I can be an adult. What do I want to do? And that's when I went to graduate school. And then I actually turned yoga into, a professional career, which was not really the intention at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's not until midlife, I think most people deal with the passing of parents and having to deal with not just the emotional loss, but also a lot of the legal and business responsibilities of stepping in, dealing with another parent who may not be able to take care of themselves. And I think a lot of that stuff really manifests in your body in a big way. And it's crazy how you had to take so much on, being the eldest as well in your 20s. And and you sort of said it before, you kind of just got into yoga because it not only just felt good, but you needed a place to kind of process a lot of this stuff and get your head square. Did you do your training in like locally in Las Vegas? Did you seek out another teacher or a teacher that you knew of?
My first training was locally in Las Vegas. Yes. I mean, this was in the early 2000s. Las Vegas was a small town at the time.
Yep.
I mean, now it's a different story, but at the time, I mean, we didn't even have a sports team. Now we have 3, you know what I mean? Like, so it was a small town. There were not many studios, and there was not even like, there was one school, so I just went there, and I ended up meeting some great people and had a great time. And lots of people I know still today had gone there as well. And so it was nice. It was a really comprehensive program. It's different than it was today. It was a year long. We had to like go. It was like, I mean, I remember her giving me articles about hamstring tendinopathies because I was curious about it back then. And I mean, she was going to a shelf and pulling a Yoga Journal magazine from the archives off her shelf and Xerox copying it because that stuff was not on the internet. I mean, we had internet, but that stuff was not on the internet yet,
Yep.
So it was a really lovely learning experience. I really, really appreciate it. And then of course I studied, millions of places since then. But. So
was grad school something you were looking to just lean into your interest in math and sciences and engineering, or were you sort of saying, well, I want to stay in the yoga world, but I find this is something I also like. What was the reason for going to grad school?
Well, I always was going to go to grad school. I mean, my sister had gone, my dad was an engineer, but the reason my parents lived in the United States is because they gave my dad a green card for his 3 engineering degrees to work here. So, and my mom was a university professor. So like, I just didn't have time. I just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so all along, during my 20s and early 30s, it was always like, well, what am I going to do? And it was like, my undergrad was in women's studies. So obviously I was not going to go into that, but I don't know, like, do I want to do, get an MBA or something? I just was trying to find my way.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like after everything settled and I'd been teaching yoga and I'd had all these anatomy questions, I was just frustrated with all this contradicting stuff. And so I ended up just enrolling in like some community college classes in like kinesiology and anatomy and biology, doing all those prereqs. And I was like, I kind of like this. So I applied at UNLV for the kinesiology exercise science program and was accepted. And when I went and kind of met with them, I had no idea what was even in the program. And the dean took one look at my transcript, which had all this engineering, because even though my undergrad was women's studies, I was a math minor and then did later enroll in an engineering program. But then my mom got surgeries and I had to drop out and whatever.
Yeah.
And so she was like, oh, we're going to put you in biomechanics because you have all this physics. Like I have all the physics and math you need for a civil engineering degree. And so I was like, okay, I didn't even know what biomechanics was. And this UNLV was a big motor control school. One of the most famous motor control researchers, Gabriella Wolf, is there. And so I kind of thought that's where I would get funneled into. And they were like, no, 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 biomechanics. I was like, all right. So they actually taught me what it was. I didn't apply thinking I was going to use my physics background. They told me I was going to be using it, and it worked out.
I think we know who the smartest person in this room is right now, Dave.
We do.
I think we've established.
Larry, even if we just merged together and you took your son Dakota and stacked him on top, I don't still think we wouldn't pull it off.
Not even close.
So Jules, when did you start getting super interested? And correct me if I'm wrong. Was your master's, your thesis for graduate school in around yoga biomechanics, or was it more something else different?
It was called The Science of Stretching, which is kind of why that's my flagship course. So I ended up, just to kind of wrap that up, because I did not go to UNLV. I ended up moving back to California because I started dating my high school boyfriend. And so I ended up leaving Las Vegas and going back to California and going to Long Beach State. And that's where I got my degree. Yep. And I ended up having this amazing thesis advisor who really encouraged me to do my own thing. Like, she saw that I was not a 22-year-old coming to grad school just trying to check something off my list. So she was like, you have a career. Let's have your thesis project be something that, builds your career. And so she was like, why don't you write like a draft for a book? And at the time, this was like, the early 2010s. And there was a lot of talk about stretching being bad for you. And, there was a lot of talk about yoga wrecking your body, New York Times articles and all that. And so I kind of went down the stretching rabbit hole. And the thesis was a disaster. I mean, it was good, but it was like any idea that I had, it was not a cohesive narrative like the book turned out to be. It was just like me talking about anything that interested me. So it did have biomechanics and tissue mechanics.
Lots of footnotes. You covered that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that was kind of how that happened. And that's why I still use that name today, The Science of Stretching.
So that was around 2010, right?
I think I finished the program in 2014.
And then you published the book, I think it came out early 19, is that right?
18 or 19.
18 or 19. So
19, I think it was 19, yeah.
Did you kind of feel like you were one of the few, if only, people digging into the biomechanics of yoga and some of these topics? Or were there other folks kind of exploring this too?
No, at the time, I think there wasn't a lot of talk about it. It's different now. I mean, at the time I was leading courses and I would be like, let's define biomechanics, and I would get all kinds of, random word salad answers, and when I do that today, they're like, well, it's a study of how force affects the body, and I'm like, the conversation is out there and people know about it.
It's elevated a bit since then.
Yeah.
So how about, around the same timing of the arrival of your book, where in general, like more broadly, the research around yoga? I know there's a lot of research out there. There's been probably a long tail trailing for the last 10, 20 years. But I get the impression that it's picked up more in the last, call it 5 to 10. Is that true? Is there more coming out? What are some of the good, the bad, and the ugly that you see in some of the research around yoga?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I would say there is more yoga research coming out than before. But I don't know for sure. I haven't looked at the numbers. I'm so embedded in it at this point that it's like, there's, 20,
Larry and I are liberal arts majors, so we don't need hard numbers. Like, we just need something kind of directional that works out,
Yeah, there's research coming out. Yes. I mean, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, there's this explosion. I wouldn't say that. I would just say,
but there's a lot. I gotta imagine there's a lot of
money
barriers.
in research.
There's money in research. Mm-hmm. There's money in research, but I gotta imagine if someone wanted to do a yoga research study, I would imagine it'd be challenging to get to raise money to do it, because it's probably hard to measure, some of this stuff with yoga, because yoga has so multidimensional in the body.
No, not necessarily. I think what you're kind of addressing is really with any exercise intervention. And one of the problems is, how do you control for it? Because people know they're doing yoga, or people know they're exercising. So it's not like you can give a placebo, so like a pill. So I think any exercise research is challenging. And I think, trying to get funding, trying to get approval, that just depends on so many things. It depends on the institution. It depends on the department. Obviously there's more research funding and interest in sports science because the budget for the athletic world is way higher than the yoga world ever, so obviously there's that. And of course, the rehab, budgets are always really big. But I think there are some schools that have really well-defined yoga programs or contemplative arts programs or, whatever. And so I don't think it's that challenging. We did a lot of research at ASU, Arizona State University, through their wellness department. It was their public health and wellness department. It wasn't really yoga related at all, but we were able to get studies done comparing yoga to walking and, yoga to other exercise interventions. It wasn't that hard because it is kind of trendy as an alternative intervention, which I have a problem with that term, but that's another story. So yeah, I don't think it's that challenging. I think more pressing question is who are we studying? And I think it's easier to get funding for special populations than it is for regular people, like regular men and regular women. It's if we've got, we did a lot for women who'd experienced stillbirth, or, we might do it for older populations or for the obese or something. That's usually easier to get funding for.
Yep.
And then, of course, it depends on the administration, how much funding is available as well. So.
True.
But wouldn't it be difficult, or did you have difficulty in the studies in that, yoga is it's not just breathing. It's not just movement, right? It's not just the mindful approach to things or the mindfulness. It's all of those things at once. So how do you separate out, we're going to do a yoga versus a walking study? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I imagine has got to be tough to do.
No, this is, so the way research is, the way you design a study is you really just pick one variable and its effect on another variable. So the nature of research sorts all of that out, because especially when you're studying biology or people, which is biology, biology is multifactorial. So these are the same concerns that you're asking about for yoga interventions as they are for nutrition interventions. You could be giving someone, herbal tea to see how it affects their metabolism. That would be the only variable you're looking at, even though herbal tea might make them happier. But you're not studying that because that wouldn't be a good study. There would be a lot of noise, And so I think the nature of research itself lends itself to weeding all of that out. Now, they don't always do that. That's not a very high quality study. If they're looking at 20 variables and seeing what sticks, that's a statistical problem. But yeah, that is an issue in yoga research, as far, not as conducting a study, but as far as making widespread conclusions. That is a problem, because you want to look at 5 yoga studies for back pain, right? And then, but if you really look at them, you just read the abstract. Oh, they all worked. Okay, whatever, But when you look at them, one did pranayama, one did only forward bends,
right.
One did this, one did, and so you can't really make a sweeping conclusion because none of them did the same thing. So it's not reproducible.
Right.
But these are issues in research, not specific to yoga. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Totally.
It's funny. I had some guests on before Larry joined back in, I think it was 2021 or early 22. The guys from men and women from Warriors at Ease, that were bringing yoga to trauma-informed yoga to military veterans and first responders. And the reason how I found those guys was I found a study that was published in the Medical Military Journal or something to that extent. And it was interesting to see this. The survey was the number of people involved, the participants, was they said yoga helped with dealing with PTS symptoms. But the survey, there was probably 12 people, and they were mostly women, and I can't remember all the specifics, but it was they had just enough numbers to confirm their thesis was yoga does help with people dealing with the stress and the trauma from having served abroad. I mean, I'm not probably doing it the best justice on highlighting the study, but it was enough for them to say that there could be a there, and that I think that was sort of the genesis for, Warriors at Ease getting more traction with support and getting people in there and bringing more trainings. So, but I've seen other studies where it is very niche, how yoga can help foster, I think it was gray matter in the brain with older women or that kind of thing. So they do sort of seem to be either small groups or they have, or it's very specific to one particular ailment or focus. But I feel like there's all kinds of them and they're all over the place. And not necessarily, bad, but just that there's just a broad mix.
Yeah. I mean, that's again, with all research. You have that with exercise research. You have that with meditation research. You have that with, with any, again, because research is a business and this is, capitalism. So here we are, right? But I think the difference is why I actually have that podcast on research literacy with my friend Ariana is because even just listening to you speak, you're like, oh, well, they had 12 people. Well, that was enough to make a conclusion. I think your definition of a conclusion is different than my definition of a conclusion. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, no doubt.
So to me, I don't look at research to tell me that yoga helps, wounded warriors. I'm like, oh, interesting. There's a study that looks at that and they had some positive effects. This needs to be researched further. We need larger sample sizes. We need to replicate the study. We need to do the exact same intervention on the same group and see if we get the same results. I mean, it could just be by chance, right? So and we need to look at what other variables are going on. What else were they doing? Was that well controlled for? But at the same time, the fact that this is being studied is a good sign. The fact that this is being studied means that there is potential there. Otherwise, we wouldn't invest in it. So it's more of I look at research as educational. There are very few studies that are of this large scale that will have you be like, wow, I really learned something new. A lot of those studies where you're really learning something new is even kind of observational studies where they're in a lab looking at testing single sarcomeres to see what happened, where they're kind of trying to come up with scientific breakthroughs. Those are really interesting studies. But when you're just studying, we did yoga versus general fitness. You know how hard it is? I would never walk out of there saying yoga is better than general exercise for women experiencing grief. In this study, it did really well, but I would never say that doesn't mean that when I have a student experiencing grief, I would say to her that yoga is better than exercise. Do you know what I mean? You don't make those conclusions. So there's this thing called internal and external validity. So internal validity is that the results are valid within the study, but then external validity are the results valid to the world at large. And you can't make those conclusions based on internal validity. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's a really important message. With drug research, it's a really, I can come up with a really good example. It's if we're going to give people a drug that reduces blood pressure, let's just say, in the study, it reduces their blood pressure. But now we give the whole population in the US that has high blood pressure this drug, but it doesn't save any lives. Is that an externally valid product? Do you know what I mean? Even though it did in the study, it reduced their blood pressure. Amazing. Right. But if it's not saving lives, then what are we doing? And so those are two different ways of measuring. And that's why all these little studies of 12 warriors, this builds on making a case and getting funding for more studies and larger studies and, all of that. But we don't make conclusions from them.
Hey, Jules, just give us a quick overview of the types of offerings and things you do. First of all, with the podcast, and then also some of your workshops, your retreats, your trainings. I'd love to highlight kind of the various different channels that you bring all this expertise and market.
I do my big program every year is my 300 hour. It's currently online. It used to be in person in Las Vegas. I'm considering it in person again, but
there's nothing like in person, you know?
I know, but everyone wants it. And then I say, well, you're going to have to fly to Las Vegas and find housing for 4 weeks.
Right.
And then everyone's like, I'll just do it online. So like, I'm happy. I'll do it, but I need people to come and pay for it.
I hear you.
So those are two different issues. But online works. I have a really good format and it works great. And so we have a research literacy component. You read some original papers. We talk about them. We do little, exercises like, things like this external validity where it's like, well, here's an example. We read a headstand paper on the forces on the cervical spine and headstand. And then we have this big discussion. And then I put them in groups and I say, okay, you own a studio together. What's your headstand policy based on this paper? And it's like, they have to really hash it out and discuss it. One year, a couple came back and said, we decided not to go into business together. So, but like, that's the type of education that I foster. So I do that in the 300-hour and I do that in my mentoring program. And those are like big commitments. And then obviously like all my smaller, things like my science of stretching webinar and my yoga biomechanics course, they all have a little flavor of that. Mm-hmm. But, in a weekend course, you don't have a lot of time to research yourself. Yeah, exactly. And then I just have, go ahead.
The anatomy lab, right?
Yes, I have an anatomy lab. It used to be twice a year, but costs are rising a lot. So now I'm trying to whittle it down to once a year. So that's coming up in June and next year will be in June as well.
And that's in Las Vegas, right?
No, that's in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
why in Colorado Springs?
That's where the lab is.
That's where you have the relationship with those guys. And
I can't just like walk into a hospital and be like, can I have a cadaver and bring my yoga friends in for the week?
Yeah, right.
Like you got to have a relationship.
I hear you've been doing it there for several years though, right?
Yeah. And there, and then also like with the board of directors, I've been studying with Gil, who's on the board for, over a decade. So I just know the team.
Yep. And tell us about the podcast, because I know Larry and I do want to talk about. We're getting to it, but the episode in February when you guys talk about barriers for men. But tell us broadly about the podcast, the mission that you guys have.
The podcast is basically for me. Ariana had a podcast back in the old days. That's actually how I met her in like 2015 or something. I was a guest on her podcast and we instantly became friends. And she got tired of running it. And because, as you know, they're a lot of work. And so I was like, well, I want something to just kind of use as a free platform to get people excited about research literacy. So I talked her into it and I do all the back end work. And I didn't want to like start a new podcast. I'm like, let's just resurrect your old one. You have you have everything in place. Let's just do it. And she was like, great, as long as I don't have to do anything. And we decided that we would do just like 20-minute episodes. And when we'd look at a paper, we don't look at the papers about like, what does it mean? And like, what are the conclusions that we can make? Because there's a lot of podcasts about that, but we like highlight one little section and we're like, why did like this? So this is about yoga and blah, blah, blah. But why did they talk about p-value and why did that not give us the effect size? And then we talk about what that means in the context of research. Yep. So that it gets people thinking a little bit more critically about a paper. They realize it's more than just the one sentence in the abstract that is the conclusion, right. That there's so we'll talk about the methods and like what they did and why and what we would have liked to see and what problems they may have had. Or we'll talk about the equipment that they used or something that calls to our attention in the paper.
I thought that was really interesting in that because I was looking for what it was about basically. And then you guys really got into the study itself and sort of the behind the scenes of the thing, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, that was cool.
So let's just tee it up. So I got a printout here. And by the way, I do want to highlight, Jules, it was awesome that you also on your website, you obviously have links to the podcast. You have free resources, which people can go in and check stuff out. A lot of great tons of blog posts about various topics that are super relevant to anyone who wants a little bit know more about the science and the implications of things related to yoga in your body. The write-up that you did was I think mirrors what you and Ariana hit in your summary. Yep. Which was also a great compliment to the podcast. So for those listening, definitely check out both podcasts that Jules does and also her blog post. So the study was men need role models, Men Need Role Models, Exploring the Facilitators and Barriers for Yoga Participation Among Men. And this looks like it was published end of last year. You guys kind of had a little fun with this, I think.
We got a little cynical.
Rightly so. So, Jules, why don't you just hit it off, kind of the key takeaways that you recall? We've got some notes here as well, but we thought this was perfectly relevant for this audience.
Well, you have to remember my undergrad was in women's studies.
Yes.
And I'm actively deconstructing
there was a little edge
patriarchy.
coming in there on that. Yes.
Yes, I'm actively deconstructing patriarchy.
Yes.
And so we found, we were a little cynical about it.
No. Come on.
No.
Just a touch.
We agree. Well, so what we were our approach to it was, yes, we agree that men are not in the yoga space, as prevalent as women are. And also we didn't really like the tone of the paper so much, because the tone of the paper was kind of like, well, women, you should be inviting men to the party. And it's like, well, women are in charge of community all the time. Why do men need an invitation? Why can't they build their own community? Yeah. Which you are doing. So I'm grateful for you to take, I don't need more to do.
I know, exactly. And by the way, I do want to point out, it's interesting. Yoga Alliance and Ipsos Research do a study every, I want to say like 6 to 8 years or whatever it is. And it was, they did it in 2008 or 2012 and 2016 and then 2022. And then it came out, I guess, in 23. But there was like this, incredible rise with the growth of yoga in the industry. But there's been a total flatline, more or less, to this study about the amount of men that are in yoga. Like 80% of participants are women in the U.S. Even more of a majority who are teachers who are also own studios. And so the industry keeps growing, but like there still is only about a middling of like 15 to 25% men who are doing this. So you're right. There's just not enough men have been getting into yoga or considering yoga. So encouragement, remember, was one takeaway that you guys had fun. Like, all right, so the research study did make it sound like it was upon women to make it more welcoming to men and like make it more comfortable for them, or maybe do it in a way that men might be able to relate with, or that kind of thing. So, but keep going on some of the key takeaways that you guys had.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
Tell me.
So there was number one was men need encouragement to attend yoga.
Yeah.
And we can circle back and hit these. 2 was men have stronger gender preferences about who yoga is for.
Yeah.
They just perceive it as being for women and not for themselves. And 3, men need convincing of what the benefits of yoga, what the benefits of yoga are. And I think that's totally true as well. I mean, I think Larry and I have always felt that not enough guys do yoga. We think a lot of guys are missing out on it. Like there's just so much it can do for you physically, mentally, and potentially spiritually in many ways. And I think guys, particularly men at midlife, hit roadblocks, or the mojo runs out on their career, or they're just sense of self, or, they're no longer who they thought they used to be. And, I think a lot of guys struggle finding ways to deal with that stuff. And so does Larry, in a healthy way. They either start drinking more, or they start just packing on the pounds, or they isolate, or they seek outside of their relationships.
Affairs, yes.
They have affairs, right? They get stuck in their job, and they just don't know which direction to go. And, I think yoga is a very great gateway, an entry point into just developing healthier habits. And I think just moving in your body and using different muscles and working through stuff can be a great complement for other things as well. But I also feel that you can also meet a lot of like-minded men and women, but particularly men who just, bring a different attitude and intention and curiosity when they do yoga or join others doing yoga.
I agree. I mean, and it's not just yoga. What you're speaking is a metaphor for, community, friendships.
Yes.
This is the first time I'm not dating, actively not dating, but I've been in several long-term relationships over the last 20 years. And it always bothered me. They were lonely. They needed me for their emotional balance and for their entertainment. And I have more friends than I can count. I'm always, I'm going on trips with my girlfriends. I have like last summer, I had 6 girlfriends at my house for a week, and we all worked and partied and had a great time, and all these men that I've been in, normal, healthy men, but don't have friendships. And I would be like, well, why don't you call this friend and go for a walk? Because men don't go for walks with each other. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a societal issue. And I think this is part of why men don't go to yoga. For the same reason that you guys in general, of course, not all men, but that most men don't meet at a coffee shop, have a cup of coffee, and then go for a walk together. But women do that all the time.
Right.
And that was where we were being cynical. Like, why do women need to invite you to be active participants in your life, in your community, in your friendships? We're at the gym when the gym is highly uncomfortable for me, when I'm, a blonde woman in the gym by myself at the squat rack. I'm constantly like,
nobody made it welcoming for Jules.
Nobody's like, no, we won't look at you. We won't bother you. Here you go.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing that. And I'm still showing up in my life, and so it's like yoga. I think it's like the chicken or the egg. If men would just go to yoga, I think that it would bleed over into other parts of their life. So, but what happens first? Do men gather together to learn about community and friendships, and then they'll naturally go to yoga more? Or do men need to go to yoga in order to do that? Or can they is it a two-way street,
I mean, I think, don't you think the whole masculine role thing is just broken?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
Fathers to sons.
Men. Yes.
Yeah. Fathers to sons. That line's broken. I mean, there's so much of it that's like, I mean, what's the biggest sport out there? It's the NFL. You know what I mean? Like that's the programming from early on. I mean,
all of it. Boys don't cry. All of that stuff.
Yeah,
all of it.
100%.
And then you add to it.
So guys reaching out to each other.
Yes.
It's like, no, I would never do that.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you got Derek and I, we can't stop calling each other every day.
But that's great.
But
that's not the norm. I just don't think you're not socialized for that. And we are. So
I, it's funny. I think we've had a lot of great guys on this podcast, and Larry and I see this more as a resource and a community, for those who are just curious. You guys are interested in yoga and want a place to send them in other directions. We've got friends across the country, guys who own yoga studios or yoga teachers, or guys who are cops or lawyers and bankers and do yoga. And so there's a lot of guys who do yoga out there, and they're just not, you don't see them as regularly, as often in the studies or in the research or in the accounting of who's doing yoga. In certain studios, in certain places, there's more men. Our friend Johnny down in Wilmington, Delaware, has lots of guys in his studio. Johnny teaches a really great, yoga class based on, sequences around stationary yoga, where he kind of hits around the horn for the body, I think, and he brings a little of that, magic of yoga. So it's not just an exercise routine. And, I think when guys do yoga and they can feel the effects in their body, they'll start to realize that this is good for them. But they do kind of need some visuals of like other men in the class or leading the class to be like, yeah, I guess I can be in here. And, not every yoga studio or class, has that. And that's not their fault. It's just the fact that I think there's some of that energy is dependent on men bringing it and showing up with it.
I think, sorry. No, I'm sorry to jump in there, but Derek, I think you're right in terms of the visuals too, because if you see yourself in that male teacher, you're going to be drawn to that male teacher. And if the delivery from that male teacher is something that resonates with you, you will go down the path further. And then maybe you'll start to open up to more, right? Like if you saw, just as an example, someone like Russell Brand teaching a yoga class, you may be like, well, I'm a big dude. Like, I don't, look like that guy. I can't do a fucking headstand, so I'm not going to go. But maybe if you saw our buddy in Colorado who was on the show, Live Wide Open, Full Throttle Yoga, right?
Yeah, Mark,
if you saw him, you might be like, all right, that's my kind of guy. But then staying with him long enough, you might start to have been opened up to some other yoga ideas. And then you might go to that Russell Brand looking guy and be
Well,
ready to receive.
And I'll say this, it doesn't need, and it shouldn't be like this alpha male attitude. Like,
Right.
I think there are guys who are tired of being in the room with guys who are super alpha male. Like, who gives a
Totally.
fuck? Like, dude, like, we just want to work on some stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a certain kind of guy to help hold that energy for like the men and the women in the room, you know?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you know, Jules, you know, you've done so much teaching. You've dealt with all kinds of different range of abilities and attitudes. I mean, tell us a little bit about, I think I remember you once saying that you mostly teach middle-aged women. I mean, was that I remember a quote back from the workshop you did in 22. By the way, I still Larry, I still have my notes from the 22.
He was busting those out before this. I was like, wow.
I could read like maybe 60% of my handwriting, but but you know, tell us your experience of kind of examples or how and when guys have embraced it and done well, and maybe examples and patterns of guys who bail and just never get into it.
Well, I'll get into that, but there's something I want to say kind of on the tails of what you were both saying. I think one of the main reasons that we don't have a lot of male yoga teachers, and one of the main reasons, the same reason why I teach middle-aged women, is because teaching yoga classes to the public is not lucrative. It does not make money. So the reason I teach middle-aged women is because women get married, give up their careers, take care of the home, and get to teach a couple yoga classes finally when their kids are old enough so that they get to get out of the house and feel like an adult. Yep. They're not paying their mortgage or their kids' college tuition from teaching yoga. And this is one of the reasons why I think men don't teach yoga. Because it's, again, you're not socialized to not be the breadwinners. Do you know what I mean? You most men, some do, but most men don't give up their careers to raise children and support, a husband's career or a wife's career, right? So in and of itself, I mean, I realize this. The reason I have so many middle-aged women is because in my trainings is because they're smart. They have master's degrees. They have given up their careers and their kids are finally in high school and they're old enough to use that sharp brain and study research because they've missed it. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But they're literally they're taking their teaching money and they're investing it into their education. They're not paying their kids' college tuition with it. That's, and so I think that is a socialized problem. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, one more thing, when a man does become a yoga teacher, he gets elevated pretty quickly. There are a lot of male yoga educators that are highly respected, but not a lot of yoga teachers in the communities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
It's a community thing.
Let's go there.
You brought that up. You brought that up in the video, and I totally wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. It's like there's the 1%, and then there's no middle class of men.
It's like cooking and chefs. Most chefs are men, but all women cook. I don't know many men who casually cook. Do you know what I mean? Women are in charge of the food at the home. Yeah. Okay, but you know what I mean. We're establishing that you are an exception to the general patriarchal construct. But just to bring light to the listeners, it's a very similar analogy. Like lots of men, professional educators in the yoga space. But not a lot of community yoga teachers. And what you're arguing is that, and I am too, is that, we need more role models in the community. Yeah. So I can be as welcoming as I want to. I'm still me, it's like we need more men in that realm. And so maybe we just need to pay yoga teachers more and then more men will teach.
Do you think that men get elevated in the yoga space faster than women?
Yes.
You do.
And I think people question them differently. There's a lot of my colleagues, and I've had a lot of experience, and some of the things that they say are just flat out incorrect, but everyone hangs on their words. And I'm like, that is not that. That is actually inaccurate.
You say it like a man, they just believe you, right?
Yes,
come on.
Yes. So I think they get elevated faster. I think, and this is just, again, like socialized, we're all just socialized to, like pay more. I mean, what I charge for a weekend course. And then when I look at some of the men in the fitness space, they charge 4 times in a weekend course what I charge, because I wouldn't be able to do that because I'm in this pink space, even though my educational quality is just as good. but it's just not, it's just not the world we're in.
Well, Larry's been teaching for a few years. I've done a lot of certification, but I've never gotten around to finally really teaching. And I'm actually just finally starting to, about to work with a studio here in Connecticut. And I'm unique, and I'm very lucky that my wife has, just an absolute awesome career, and she's very good at what she does, and she cranks. And we've got a 1-year-old at home, and I'm at home more now because I basically I just tired of doing the corporate thing.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in media. I worked at ESPN and Disney. I worked at Charter and Paramount, and I just got so burned out with just doing the corporate thing. And so I'm finally, in my own way stepping up and looking to teach yoga. And I live in a community or a world that's like, or a territory. It's private equity, it's investment banking. There's a lot of like hard charging dudes in this sort of space. And I think more of them need to kind of get into this stuff. And I just don't think they're gonna do it unless they see other guys in the room or in the front of the room. And that's not to take anything away from some of the amazing teachers in this area that are women. And I think if the guys are really get into yoga, they'll start realizing that different teachers bring their own style and focus and technique. And they might totally find that they love how so-and-so teaches handstands, or how they just lay out a sequence or the flow. So, Larry and I are trying to do our part. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, but at least we enjoy pushing the boulder.
But we've spent some time, you and I, talking
about the old guy.
We've spent some time talking about that transition, right? From like, well, how's that going to feel to be at the club saying like, I'm out of the corporate thing. I'm a yoga teacher now.
Yeah,
yoga teacher.
You know what I mean? Like you just explained the exact situation that I explained on how people can be yoga teachers, and you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So
yes.
if you don't seize this and become a male role model for a male community, I'll never forgive you.
I'm never going to bring you back because I don't want you yelling at me for an hour. Definitely
this is what we want.
I totally agree.
Like,
it's like it's a little bit of like just stepping up into the opportunity.
Yes.
And I do feel very blessed and lucky to have this. And quite frankly, as a guy who's in his early 50s, like I don't want to be sitting on a train or sitting at a desk for another 15 years. Like I want to be able to hold on to my body and my brain and, raise my kid and enjoy my family and be thriving in my 70s, which is a big pitch that we have to guys, especially at midlife. Like you want to be the Johnny Lama when you're 76 years old. Like you got to get into yoga now. Like this is the time to start developing these skills and this awareness, Well,
you want to be able to get up if you fall down. You need to be working on it now. Right?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So Jules, we have about 10 minutes left, but we do want to hear a little bit about, some of the benefits, some of the reasons why guys should get into yoga from the physical benefits, how it can improve their strength, their flexibility. We'd love to have you riff a little bit on some of what you know firsthand and some of the research you've seen, so these guys can kind of be inspired to get in there.
And if I could add this part on there, since this is right, and this, because this is right up your alley, what's the most palatable idea about yoga biomechanics or biomechanics within yoga that a guy can take away?
Jules, you're Larry, you're gonna tee up Jules this massive question. She needs like an hour and a half to answer this.
Her book is called Yoga Biomechanics.
Yoga Biomechanics.
My God, she should be able to spit this out.
Yeah, but you haven't read the book, so
liberal arts majors.
Exactly.
Suggested reading.
Right.
I mean, the book's central thesis is really
I should clarify.
Complicated. Yes,
I should clarify. I didn't mean a palatable idea from the book. I meant yoga, the idea of yoga biomechanics or biomechanics within yoga. What's the quick takeaway for somebody?
For that, you need to know what the central thesis
I think that
of the book
requires
is.
an explanation around biomechanics.
Holden Caulfield was going to...
No. Holding Caulfield's other
So
problems.
I think sometimes people look at the book and think that I'm going to teach you how to do the poses right for the best outcome.
Right.
And that's not possible. That like biomechanics has its limitations. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And yoga is not a high load, high speed activity. So like you're not going to yin yoga your way into a better deadlift. Do you know what I'm saying? Because so what the kind of overall thesis became of the book was like, let's understand tissue behavior. Let's understand, injury and safety, because there was a lot of talk around the time about yoga causing injuries and all that stuff, So let's talk about what mechanical tension and stretching is. And so like, you don't walk away necessarily with a like, I've read this book and I'm a man and now I realize I need to go to yoga more often. That's not what this is. It's more of an educational thing.
Right.
But I do think it gives people some insight into like that. I really spend time decentering range of motion, because I think that's one of the issues with yoga is everyone thinks you have to do these big bendy poses. And there's like, in order to do some of the approaches to stretching that I do, kind of got to rein it in a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I think that is like a comforting takeaway maybe for your audience. It's like nobody actually cares what the poses look like. People just think they care because of the marketing of yoga. But I mean, inside of a studio, nobody actually cares, and of course there are some styles like, some of the, Ashtanga, whatever, where there's like, yeah, it's really, really focused on that. But in today's day and age, we've come a long way. You know what I mean? And I think most general classes at a boutique, locally owned studio or at a gym, nobody actually cares. Like I take yoga classes at my gym and lots of men come to that. And, everybody's just doing whatever they want. And it's great because it's not really about all of that. So, what does it do in terms of strength and in terms of flexibility? That we don't really have, research doesn't answer that for us. Obviously, if you do put yourself in positions that require more flexibility, you'll get more flexible. That's just a given because of the laws of adaptation. But I think what yoga does and why it would be so great for men is it gives you a huge sense of body awareness, self-perception, even just like, proprioceptive type stuff. So if you are an athlete or you are a weekend warrior and you like to go skiing or whatever, I think that like the familiarity with yourself, emotionally, mentally, and physically, there's nothing like yoga for that. And that's not really something that has been researched or can be researched, because like we talk about this all the time. Like they do this, they will pit regular exercise versus proprioceptive exercises. Well, what is a proprioceptive exercise? How is it different than any other exercise? It's like, it's the point of paying attention. You know what I'm saying? So I think that is the biggest takeaway. And as a result, all that time looking inward and paying attention should hopefully bleed into relationships with others, right? Now we're back to these 8 limbs, and back to the sense of community and how you interact, not just with yourself, but with the people in your life and how your friendships form and all of that. That to me would be the main reason. I mean, just yesterday, I'm a big tennis player. Just yesterday, I was talking with some of the women I was playing with, and they were talking about like the fight to win, and I was like, yeah, and they're like, I was like, I'm not really getting that nervous. I'm like, oh, I'm just having fun, and I was saying like, maybe I've done too much yoga, because like I just want to go have a good time playing tennis, I'm like, oh, it's okay if I lose, and they're like, what, and I'm like, sorry.
Well, you just enjoy the process of doing tennis. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Larry's also a tennis player. I love tennis as well. And one of the things I felt like yoga has done for me on the court is I'm a lot more flexible, and I have, better ability to put my body in a better place to react to the ball and not, do something crazy with my body that throws out my back or something like that. I mean, you look at Djokovic and he's just like Gumby out there, and he does a ton of yoga.
But that's where I'm saying. So if you go into the book, you realize that yoga is probably not enough to change your tissues. Like it's not like if you don't do yoga, you're going to get joint capsules that don't move. You know what I mean? Like yoga's not really enough to change the elasticity or the stiffness. So when you say things like, oh, it's improved my game and it's given me better range of motion, it's given you a better perception of your body. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you you are a better mover. Like I'm an elegant mover on the tennis court, not because I've done a million forehands. I'm an elegant mover because my entire adult life, I have been paying attention to, where my hands go, where my feet, like how I feel, how I sense, like it's that.
Yep.
It's like the somatic aspects of yoga.
Yes.
Not the biomechanical aspects of yoga.
I feel that in hockey too. I'm more forward in the boot of my skate. I'm more on the balls of my feet.
Yep.
I have better awareness, so I don't, get taken out by a caught edge, edge in the ice. And I think for guys getting older who want to stay active and stay competitive and avoid injuries, that it's a great thing to add and a great thing to weave in. Larry, do you have something else you want to hit before we wrap?
I was just going to say, for me, it's skiing. We talked about that a while back there. I feel it a lot when I ski. That's all I have to add.
And you probably enjoy the run better too, right?
And you enjoy the run better. Yeah. And you can sort of feel yourself with gravity and the mountain and the angle of the thing. Yeah. Yeah. Much more graceful, I think, now than I was as a teenager when I was racing, because it was harder. Everything was harder, and faster. Anyway, so no, I think this has been awesome.
Yeah, Jules, this has been great. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We love all your stuff. We have a lot of homework before the next time we ever chat with you. But we're going to have all of your links to the podcast, your website, your socials. We'd love to have you back on someday.
Anytime.
Maybe go into a specific topic that you think would be relevant for our audience, or something that is integrate into an upcoming workshop or event you're doing. But this has been great. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.